Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is Matt Maxwell. I'll be your guide and host for the day. We're going to wait just a few more minutes. We had a pretty good turnout for today's webinar, at least from signups and especially a second one even so tomorrow. So really looking forward to the opportunity to share with you all about where millennials are, being able to grow them, retain them, and things of that nature. To set expectations for today, we're only going to take roughly 20 to 30 minutes to discuss the topic. I'll do a brief overview of the session 1 and session 2 we previously did in the last 2 months. Had great attendance. The recordings are available online as well. And what we'll do is go through and just chat very quickly here about the retaining portion. Each one of these webinar series are meant to be very quick, very brief, give you some best tips, tools, tricks, things to try within your organization to again work with the specific demographic known as the millennials. So we'll get into that here in just 1 second. As another piece, we have a couple questions we're going to be posting throughout today's webinar. So really looking forward to your honest and very clear feedback as to some of the percentages we're looking for as part of our series to help ICBA. We are growing a feedback session here for ICBA and CUNA to be able to share this with them and indicate how the market's changing and how both our banks and credit union family are growing. I see several customers on the call, really encouraging to see you. Let's jump into today's discussion. So the big part of today's discussion is going to revolve around the retention. As I mentioned in session 1, here we go. What are millennials? And we talked about the differences between the various demographics. Our silent generation, baby boomers, of course, Generation X, followed by the millennials, and now Z behind them. But specifically for today's discussion, we have the millennial workforce, which is 18 to 35-year-olds. And really, I fought this for the longest time because a lot of my friends and older people we hung out with growing up were all Generation X. So I really thought I was Gen X, and unfortunately, I'm not. But again, my name is Matt Maxwell. I'm a solution consultant here at Passageways. I'm Director of Business Development, helping our staff in the employee portal in Ensemble Solutions. And as part of this, I fall right into this workforce. Started working right out of high school, went to college late, and eventually ended up here at Passageways almost 6 years ago, crazy enough to think. And privilege of having a beautiful wife and 3 boys already, and really growing in much of our demographic here, controlling a lot of the buying power as we get going. So where do we sit today from a workforce standpoint? So, and this is again recapping a little bit of the information, but I want to set the stage. So those of you on the call attended 1 and 2, I apologize for the rehash, but I know we've slept, at least I have, a couple times since then. I wanted to share really where are we today. So millennials already take up over 50% of our workforce as the boomers are in steady decline, and Gen X is just teetering right there with the baby boomer or with the millennial side, but we still see a good uptick as one of the biggest generations here, the millennial workforce. What are we known for? Well, really a tech savvy, the digital natives, as many people have referred to us. And what are the differences? Well, Gen Xers is really known for being entrepreneurial, right? And low on the executive side. Not as many Gen X in the boardroom space yet. What we're using on that side, senior leadership starting to take over there as boomers are in decline. Of course, boomers are loyal. I mentioned in previous organizations about the going to work for Chrysler, right, or Ford. That was the big dream for a lot of people as baby boomers growing up. That was you wanted to work there for 30 years, 20 years, get your time on, and be able to move from there. And really how millennials see themselves versus the world is very different. And this is the same with any generation. And ultimately, it's as us as leaders, and I'm responsible here at Passageways for recruitment and development, and have seen a huge change in how perceived, right? Interview questions. I won't go into that, but we talked about that in the last webinar. Interviewing has to be different. What we're after, the goals of these individuals, which is where we're going to spend a lot of time today. But ultimately, they don't view themselves as tech savvy per se, right? Less than 35% of what we describe ourselves as is tech savvy versus everybody else is 80+%, right? That's really the big chunk. And we tend to think we're just fun loving because it's how we always do it, but we're willing to work hard. You see the huge disconnect, right, on both fronts, and it's always fun to see this. And we know it to be true, right? It's alignment. It's the young guns versus the seasoned vets, and it's always a great discussion in the process. Again, I talked about this in detail in the previous two. If you didn't catch 1 and 2, please do so and give us some feedback as well. So let's talk about today, which is the tenure. So the expectation of a millennial typically is in the 1 to 3 years with any given organization. Very, very, very different from the past, right? So we're recruiting lots of people, continually hiring and developing. Again, we talked about that in great detail last time. But this is key to any discussion, right? We want to be able that we're setting expectation for us as staff as we, over half our employees, and you've probably seen this, fall in this demographic. We want to be able to set expectations and ultimately attract them longer. Not just from day one, but long term. How do we do this long term? And some of the big pieces, and again, we hit this in session 2, was interview. It's motivational fit. It's ethics, work ethics here. How do they line up? Because it's a very different look and feel generation from the past, and it has its pros and cons. And that's where we're going to spend, again, a lot of our time today, talking about the traits and observations. So, again, millennials, you probably can relate with each of these, and we're going to talk about them in length here for the last 15 to 20 minutes. But ultimately, it is our squirrel mentality. It's the people who are shiny objects, running off into left field, into the abyss, feel entitled a lot of times, or a sense of entitlement, open-minded, desensitized. Obviously, they have access to more information at their fingertips than any other generation available. And then they have this different sense of, a flat level, right? Being able to have your, first name basis with the CEO or the President of the United States. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But it's ultimately having access to information right there. Now, from a weakness standpoint, we've got the laziness standpoint, and ultimately the huge change here is we've got they're known as helicopter parents, hovering above. They've got their checklists, their tissues, all the things that go into it. Ultimately, as some of the baby boomers as well as Gen X, it's a very different upbringing, right? Based on how our parents were, whether we do or don't, what we would change. And so this force is used to having somebody falling right behind them with everything they need, or being able to help them right on the spot. It's a completely different sense as you think about the parents, and us as supervisors and people of that nature, as teammates. We have to approach the way we do this differently. And then acknowledgement here as easy wins. So get a participation award for just about anything. My 7-year-old son got an award for being part of soccer. He got another one for basketball. And they had a losing season, right? It's a very different one from here. So we're setting expectations for the staff at a very different level. And a lot of this I know is rehashing, as we all know, from staff, and ultimately this squirrel mentality. If an app doesn't work right, if something doesn't work quickly, we're in, we're out, we're moving on. Same is held true for our jobs and our roles, and this is why this is so vital within your organization to be able to track how this is happening, engage staff, give them some early wins so that they can ultimately be able to go through and help them right on the spot without having to recreate the wheel. And really, ultimately, if we can get them engaged, we can keep them long term, right? It's using those superpowers they do have to be able to pull those in and make them more effective throughout their day. So let's talk about the main traits. So we talked about some of the cons and things of that nature. But what are we actually going to do? Let's get the action items. I promise you some pieces you can apply within your organization today to be able to exponentially grow and retain our clients, right? And be able to go from there. So one thing within this is the view, how they work. So it's social interaction, often referred to as collaborative, but it's really coining the phrase social interaction, where they want to be able to work in teams and have multiple people. They multitask, as we mentioned, flipping between apps, taking on multiple projects, taking over the world, right? Helping social good here at one of the further pieces. Very open-minded and have lots of energy in the process. It's just a matter of, can we focus that and pull that in right on the spot. The last part is very self-confident, high expectations for themselves. Sometimes this is team environment, but a lot of times it's them as an individual, again, because they're not used to as much of a team environment as somebody being right behind them, picking up after them per se. So how can we, as financial institutions, really evolve and help this group? So one of those is real-time information. So with this generation, having a 90-day review, having a 6-month, an annual, a lot of times they can't wait that long to have gratification, right? Oh, I did a good job last year. We've all been there, right, where we had a supervisor or someone who meets with you once a year, and that's when you find out whether you're in good standing or not, right, and what you need to improve on. And real-time information is what this generation is used to, whether they are tweeting the President of the United States and somebody tweets back instantly. Very different from when I was growing up of, we mailed in, right, our notes, and we might get an autographed photo back from someone. It's the same concept. It's how do we go through and make sure that the staff are getting the instant gratification. You can do this on a daily basis. I'll give you some other best practices, such as here in a minute on how to engage them. But it's really as soon as it happens. In the previous webinars, we talked about setting expectations before they even set foot in the building, saying how excited you are, giving them that pulse that they're going to get things back and forth as opposed to reactive, right? So it's really a place where they're used to getting this information very quickly. One of the positive pieces that we recommend for any of our clients in the process is setting up an employee recognition program. A lot of teams already have this within our financial institutions, whether it's a paper format, bulletin board, or once a month in the newsletter, we send out a thank you to one person who did something really cool. Again, real time. So what we've seen clients do is something that's very instant, sending a high five or a thank you to someone for going above and beyond the call of duty. When you set expectation as such, it really changes the way our staff look at each other, because when they send a thank you, it's for something that's, again, above and beyond. And us as management and leadership, I should say, I don't really like the term management, but as leadership, it's our job to lead the charge and send those and set the example from there. And after that, it becomes a part of our culture. And teams who've done this very well don't know what they would do without it in the process from there. We also have, throughout this process, the ability to choose someone for sending and receiving, in addition to instant gratification here. Again, by peers, that's the really cool thing. But by peers, you can go through and see, for instance, who's sending high fives, how many came in. We can say, you know what, we had 80 come in last month. I think we can get 90 this month. And then people start, getting in that culture of being able to share and gratify each other from there. So with that being said, the next part, let's start to transition from, feel good and things of that nature and instant gratification and real time to change. So this is a big thing for a huge difference between the baby boomers and the millennial generation. And that being that millennials love change. We love coming in and disrupting, trying a new app, making it easier, implementing technology to streamline a process. It comes first nature, right? It's one thing they're used to. They use Google Drive, they use email, they've got, rather than Dropbox and things of that nature, they're using Google Drive and attaching those to sheets and being able to have all the information they need from college without a thumb drive. That is a huge difference from the previous generation and the one before them. So through that process, they rely on some of the technology and change dramatically. So if we have the same process throughout, and I know we have our procedures, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about those. We need those. Good to have guidelines and repeatable process and processes. But this is really the key to setting up a change organization, even as a financial institution or a conservative bank, progressive credit union, progressive bank who's in acquisition mode. Regardless where you are, change management is a key and vital part to any part of a millennial interaction, because ultimately what you're looking to do is to be able to pull these individuals in, use their expertise, and empower them to do their parts. And we're going to this in more detail. But throughout this, you want to be able to see information customized for them. A lot of organizations still are using shared drive and email, and if they have an intranet, it's very stagnant. And so we encourage all of our clients at least to think about what we call a relaunch or a rebrand every 2 to 3 years, if not sooner. We've seen that be very successful because it's not a complete rethought and a multi-month project. It's more of just progressing where we are today, because a lot of things can change in 18 months, 24 months. And as we start to get staff, and if turnover is higher, right, as the expectations, the staff want to see some of those changes. And it's a lot simpler to do electronically than it is to change our branches, right? So with that being said, I want to move to our first poll question here. So I'm going to pull up this one. I'm going to launch this poll, and as promised, I give you plenty of time, but I want your candid feedback as to universal tellers, and this is leading into some of our next discussions here for the future webinars. But give me your feedback. What percentage of your staff are universal tellers? Okay, punch that in for me, hit the submit, go in, and be able to share. I want to see how the trends are going across our banks, our credit unions, our community banks, and others we've got on the call. Start to punch those in, because you're going to see a very different trend, not only in industry, but even geographically. So we'll provide this information to both ICBA as well as CUNA, so you guys can digest those, and then I'll share them after the webinar. But this is key, right? It's another one of those change agents that you can insert there and disrupts the whole business model as we get to looking at this information long term here, okay? So we'll go ahead and close that poll and start to talk about the next part. So with this customized lifestyle, right, Pandora, and you saw the example, I'm not going to read those to you, but I myself love Pandora, love these resources where I can go through, and based on my likes, it gives me more, it gives me my exact Dave Matthews station with some of the information, or my high school station, my childhood experience. It has exactly what I want, even down to the video games, as you saw. So how does this play out in the workplace? Well, because we have such a diverse and customized lifestyle, cross-functional teams are key, because it opens up the experience of these individuals who are used to working perhaps with their parents, with other individuals, sense of entitlement. They take these projects on with a lot of pride because it's their one piece, right? They get to have a little bit of skin in the game. And we've seen specifically with solutions such as Passageways, where even branch managers and teams like that will take ownership of a lot of major initiatives within the organization, because it empowers them in a safe and positive environment to impact how everybody else is doing business. And that's huge. And cross-functional teams are a big part of this, especially as we talk about universal tellers and the ability to take a transition from beginning to end right on the spot. A very different example of how groups are reacting here. So with that being said, let's talk about where do we fit in cross-functional teams today. So I'm going to pull up our second questionnaire here. The poll should be open on your screen there. So what percentage of your millennial workforce are in management leadership positions? So I'm talking about, starting to take over. Use your best judgment here in where this fits. But ultimately, we want to see how are we progressing long-term, because the next part of the webinar, I'm going to talk specifically about recession planning, right? So what do we do after leadership has moved on? So let's take starting to talk about department heads and director type positions, director and VP positions within your organization. So go ahead and punch those in if you could. And again, this will help us build the content as we go into our next webinar series. But this is key, right? It's being able to see, where do we fit in the process? How many individuals are starting to progress from line level to middle management, and at what rate? That's the important part of today's discussion. Okay. Excellent. So we're starting to get a couple best practices, right? We can talk about employee engagement. We can talk about all the cross-functional teams and getting people involved. Community engagement is a great resource for this. It is part of our resource, and we didn't get this plugged into today's slides, but we're doing a lot of research as to community engagement and involvement as an organization. There's nothing more powerful than being able to provide someone in their 20s and 30s here to say, hey, take on this project. Or, for instance, they say, I have a huge passion for the homeless shelter in the area. Could I take that on as something, and represent the organization? And then before you know it, you've got a team of 10 volunteers all helping the local shelter once a month. That individual feels fulfilled. They're part of it. They're building something of value. They're doing their social good. And that's something any of us as a financial institution can provide to the group. So I really encourage a lot of those. Some other takeaways. It's creating change. So a lot of our clients, and we've seen this in the banking space, is the look and feel of intranets and portals. Those of you that don't have them, even further, right? It's not having that centralized place to go for content as a millennial. I talked about this in the last webinar in a little bit more detail, but you need a customized experience. They need somewhere that's visually appealing, perhaps, that fits the culture. Some of our more conservative banks still will go with something that's it's more branded, is with prestige. Some of our credit unions have gone with things that are very, very fun-loving, such as Monsters in things of that nature for their October Halloween themes, right? So it's very engaging, it's vibrant, it changes with the seasons. Some of our clients are doing the mountain views, harvest. If you're in the Midwest here, it's a big part, right? We're planting right now. We're going through, we're weeding and all those type pieces. This is very, very, very key to ensuring that our staff are getting the experience they need. And within the cross-functional component, employee intranet is the simplest component we recommend for groups to start to think about here. And these are just a couple examples from some of the clients, and I'm not sure if I see any on the call who we've got the examples here, but I appreciate all the submissions from our client conference throughout that. Now, beyond the landing page and content, whether you have a portal or you don't, I recommend something of this nature, especially when you have more than 50 employees. It really ramps up at 100 employees, just to give you the scale. But management blogs. So a blogging type functionality is ultimately, again, resonates with the millennials because it's a flat organization. They have access to anyone. So why can't I have access to, the content such as strategically, where are we going? What initiatives are happening? Where's the update as to how things are going and, what we're doing internally? This is really key for individuals to be able to see what's going on, where, be able to show, the changes that are happening within the organizations. And management blog is a great resource for that, and just posting what's happening, where people can comment, they can subscribe, they're getting real time. Some of our clients will even do specific times of the month or quarter where senior staff will get in and respond to these real time and be able to say, here's a new announcement from our CEO, and the staff are helping him or her respond right on the spot. So those are very, very, very key to ensuring that end users are getting back and forth reaction, right? It's not just a one-way download, which most intranets are historically, or shared drives where it's a one-way conversation. It's got to be live. It's got to be vibrant in order to engage individuals and really be able to pull them in. And then you can decentralize and empower individual departments and business areas and other groups in order to be able to help them. So really pulling this all together, and we're right at that time where I promised you 25 to 30 minutes. I won't take more than that. This is meant to be a quick lunch and learn type situation here. And then our next series will be next webinar next month. We'll send out the invite after here, is really about recession planning and preparing as it looks like now. A lot of our staff haven't reached that management position yet. So how do we groom them? What's that look like compared to previous generations and groups of that nature? So we have, as we can see here, we've got multitaskers, people who have that squirrel mentality. How do we focus that? Well, we need to give them outlets so they can jump around, they can interact with, consume management blog type information, blog information, organizational wide information, I should say, and department specific. We need them to be able to jump between projects and tasks, such as community engagement. They're open-minded, the social good component, willing to take on a brand new process because they feel they can do it all from beginning to end, such as universal tellers. And they're really, this type of technology comes very simple to them, whether it's drag and drop and ease of use, such as a passageways ensemble type solution, or it's just giving them something to get a little bit of self-confidence internally. And again, that's very hard to do outside of their electronic home, because let's be fair, a lot of the new branches are moving to pods and different looks and feels, completely changing the way business is done. I know Purdue Federal here in town is changing their model, updating all their branches to reflect Purdue University, conservative school, but progressive in the way they do things. And it's a very different experience. And that's expensive at the end of the day. And if you get it wrong, it's very hard to change in the process. So electronically, being able to have a portal or an intranet is key to that. We recommend that for any group, whether it's a passageways instance or something of that nature. And that brings us to our last question, because at the end of any of these webinars, I always like to ask this question here. So it pulls up, just finding out if you'd found out, did you know that a user portal here can be driven, an employee intranet can be driven by end users. This isn't an IT project. This isn't something that requires dedicated programmers and an executive who's making changes, or a programmer in a basement. This is something that the end users need to interact with, and it needs to be live and vibrant. So those of you customers, I'm hoping we're getting a few yeses here. If you didn't know it was possible, go ahead and punch in no if you're customers and want to find out about some of these new initiatives that we shared at our client conference from clients. This is where we're hearing this information, is recognizing the trends based on client interactions and seeing the trends of millennials not only taking over but taking leadership positions at a very early age, because they're getting these early wins, and we're beginning to keep them not just the 3 years but retaining them long term. Okay, so again, in summarizing today's points, get their hands on something, get them a little bit of fun in the game, in the process. Keep it electronic, because that's what they know. Interactive, doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to be something that's second nature to them, with, again, keeping in mind that we are a business. We are a financial institution, most of us on the call here. And do appreciate your time today. If there are any questions, feel free to punch those into the queue. I will stick around here for a bit. Otherwise, we will send out the link to webinar 1, which is what millennials are, where they spend their time, what they look like, how they dress, what apps they're using. We did that in about 35 minutes. Did the second part 2, which is recruiting, and how to onboard employees, how different that is from the past, and how use of not just a portal but other interviewing tools can be beneficial. And of course today, which is retaining our staff. How do we engage them, get them doing more than just a simple process, right? Following the same procedure the same way all the time, and that's your job. Come in, punch out. Does not reflect the people we're hiring, right? And long term, we're at this place now where we're seeing the mix shift, and Generation X start to take over, senior leadership positions, and start to see staff come in and do that. So we do appreciate your time. Again, my name is Matt Maxwell. We're included my contact information. If you would like a conversation regarding what's possible and what's done here, you feel free to visit passageways.com, fill out a contact us form, check out the videos, the webinars from clients, talking about what they do and love. First National did a great webinar in City National last summer with me regarding exponential growth through employee portals and being able to be acquisition driven. And they've acquired 3 different institutions within 18 months, and how that's possible only through centralizing your information. So again, thank you for your time. I appreciate your steadfast here. And don't forget to sign up for webinar part 4 coming in July regarding recession planning. But with that, do not see any questions in the queue. So with that, we will adjourn. I thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.